The Search for Atlantis, Deconstructing Plato's Lost City. There is a silence that belongs only to the deep. A crushing, absolute quiet that holds the weight of millennia. Down here, in the cold, abyssal dark, the world forgets. Continents drift, mountains rise and fall, and the clamor of human history fades to a pressure-hushed whisper. But some stories refuse to be forgotten. They persist, not in stone or bone, but as an echo in our collective memory. A ghost that haunts the edges of our maps. And no ghost is more persistent, more seductive, than that of a lost island continent. A city of impossible splendor, home to a civilization of demigods, swallowed by the sea in a single, terrible day and night. We have given it a name. Atlantis. For centuries, we have searched for it. We have scoured the ocean floor, deciphered cryptic texts, and followed the faintest of clues, all in the hope of finding a world lost to time. But this is a story poisoned by hope. A mystery obscured by the very passion of those who seek to solve it. To find the truth of Atlantis, we must not begin with the deep ocean, but with the dry dust of ancient Athens. We must turn away from the siren song of the myth and listen to the careful words of the man who first gave it to the world. A man who was not a mystic, or a treasure hunter, but a philosopher. His name was Plato. Part 1, The Source. In the 4th century BCE, Athens was a city grappling with its own reflection. A generation removed from the golden age of Pericles, it had endured plague, the humiliation of defeat in the Peloponnesian War, and the execution of its most famous gadfly, Socrates. In the wake of this turmoil, Plato, Socrates' most brilliant student, dedicated his life to a single question: what makes a good society? What makes a just state? It is within this philosophical quest that the story of Atlantis is born. It appears in 2 of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. And it is not presented as a myth he invented, but as a history, carefully preserved and passed down through generations. In the dialogue, a politician named Critias recounts a tale he heard from his grandfather, who in turn heard it from the great Athenian lawgiver, Solon. Nearly 2 centuries earlier, Solon had traveled to Egypt, to the ancient temple city of Sais. There, a priest of immense age, a keeper of records that stretched back into the mists of time, revealed to him a history unknown to the Greeks. "O Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are never anything but children. You have no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. In mind, you are all young." The priest explained that the Greeks' memory, ravaged by periodic floods and destruction, was short. But Egypt's records were ancient and unbroken. He spoke of a forgotten chapter in Athens' own history, from 9,000 years before their time. A moment when ancient Athens, in its purest, most virtuous form, had stood against a mighty and insolent empire that had emerged from the Atlantic Ocean. An empire whose seat of power was an island, called Atlantis. This is the crucial, often overlooked detail. The story of Atlantis is not just about a doomed city. It is the story of a war. A war between a small, virtuous state, and a vast, corrupting superpower. Part 2, The Blueprint. Plato, through the voice of Critias, gives us a blueprint. His description is not vague or dreamlike. It is methodical, mathematical, and fantastically precise. The city, he tells us, was a marvel of geography and engineering. At its heart lay a central island, upon which stood a temple to Poseidon, the god who had founded the city with a mortal woman named Cleito. This sacred hill was ringed by a moat of seawater. Then a ring of land, then another of water, then land again. 3 of water, and 2 of land, in perfect concentric circles. Bridges spanned the water rings, guarded by gates and towers. A massive canal, 50 stadia long, was cut from the outer sea, allowing triremes to sail directly into the heart of the city, creating a harbor in the stone rings themselves. The walls gleamed with precious metals. The outer wall was coated in brass, the middle in tin, and the wall of the citadel itself, flashed with the red fire of orichalcum. A mythical metal, second only to gold in value. We still do not know what it was. An alloy? A poetic invention? To Plato's audience, the name itself would have conjured a sense of otherworldly wealth and power. This was a civilization blessed by the gods, a society of demigods whose divine nature initially made them virtuous and wise. They were a naval superpower, with a fleet of 1,200 warships and an army drawn from a vast federation of 10 kingdoms, ruling over an empire that stretched into Europe and Africa. But, Plato tells us, their divine nature waned. As generations passed, it was diluted by mortal blood. Virtue gave way to avarice. Filled with unrighteous avarice and power, Critias says, their ambition became limitless. They set out to enslave all the remaining lands. And it was then that they met the armies of ancient Athens. The story cuts off. The dialogue of Critias is unfinished. But from the Timaeus, we know the ending. After the Athenians repelled the Atlantean invasion, a higher power passed its judgment. There came, Plato writes, violent earthquakes and floods. And in a single, dreadful day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared, and was swallowed up by the sea. An ending so absolute, so final. And a description so detailed, it has been irresistible to explorers for millennia. They have taken Plato's blueprint, and they have gone in search of his lost city. Part 3, The Search. The search for Atlantis is a history of hope and misinterpretation. A journey to find a physical place that matches a philosophical blueprint. Over the centuries, countless locations have been proposed. But 3 candidates, in particular, capture the core of this obsessive search. Our first stop is not in the Atlantic, but the Aegean. The island of Thera, known today as the stunning volcanic caldera of Santorini. Here, in the Bronze Age, flourished the Minoan civilization. A sophisticated, seafaring people with advanced art, architecture, and trade networks. Then, around 1600 BCE, the volcano at the island's heart erupted in one of the largest explosions in human history. It blew the center of the island apart, triggered colossal tsunamis, and sent plumes of ash across the globe, potentially crippling the Minoan civilization. The evidence for this being Atlantis is compelling. We have a real, advanced civilization, wiped out by a cataclysmic, sinking, event. The circular bay left by the volcano mimics Plato's description of concentric rings. The excavated city of Akrotiri, buried in ash, reveals a city of remarkable sophistication, a Bronze Age Pompeii. But for every piece that fits, another grinds against it. The eruption at Thera occurred 1,000 years before Solon, not 9,000. It's a city, not a continent-sized empire. And most damningly, it is located here, in the heart of the Greek world, not, as Plato explicitly states, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar. To accept Thera is to assume Plato's numbers and geography were wildly, almost unrecognizably, wrong. This leads our search to our second location, one that respects Plato's geography. In 1968, off the coast of the island of Bimini in the Bahamas, divers discovered a remarkable formation. A half-mile long, perfectly linear arrangement of massive, flat limestone blocks resting on the seabed. It became known as the Bimini Road. To many, it looked like a pavement. A remnant of a harbor wall, or a great coastal road. It was located in the Atlantic, in the right direction. It looked, for all the world, man-made. But science, over time, has offered a more sober explanation. Geologists have studied the formation extensively. Their conclusion is that the Bimini Road is a natural phenomenon. A form of beach rock which fractures in geometric, block-like patterns as it forms. Core samples and radiocarbon dating show the rock formed only a few thousand years ago. There are no tool marks, no other artifacts, no other signs of a sunken city. The road, it seems, leads nowhere. Our third candidate takes us back to the gates of the Atlantic, to the coast of southern Spain, just beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Here, in the wetlands of the Dinnana National Park, archaeologists have investigated a tantalizing theory. This region was once home to the semi-mythical Tartessian civilization, a culture famed for its mineral wealth that disappeared from history around the 6th century BCE. Using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, researchers have identified strange, circular and rectangular anomalies buried beneath layers of marsh and sediment. They have proposed these are memorial cities, scale models of Tartessian cities that were wiped out by a massive tsunami that ravaged this coastline thousands of years ago. The location is right. The story involves a wealthy civilization destroyed by the sea. The circular structures are intriguing. But the evidence remains fiercely debated. The link to Plato's grand narrative is tenuous, built on layers of speculation. The search, once again, dissolves into the murky water of what might have been. Thera. Bimini. Spain. Each holds a fragment of the story. A sunken city, a path in the ocean, a location beyond the pillars. But none hold the whole. Each attempt to map Plato's blueprint onto the real world ends in frustration. And this leads us to the most powerful, most profound, and most likely solution to the mystery. What if the blueprint was never for a city of stone? What if the search itself is the mistake? What if Atlantis was never meant to be found on a map, because it was a map of something else entirely? Part 4, The Allegory. We must return to Plato. The philosopher, not the historian. Remember his world. He had witnessed his beloved Athens, once the noble defender of Greece against the Persian Empire, devolve into an empire itself. He saw its democracy become corrupted by power, its ambition lead to the disastrous invasion of Sicily, a catastrophic military blunder driven by hubris. Plato was crafting a cautionary tale. A thought experiment for his fellow Athenians. He presents them with two ancient, archetypal states. On one side, there is primeval Athens. Small, virtuous, land-based, and just. A society living in perfect, philosophical balance. And on the other, Atlantis. A thalassocracy, a naval empire. Blessed with infinite resources and divine heritage, but ultimately corrupted by it. Driven by what Plato calls unseemly greed and power. An island empire that uses its naval might to conquer its neighbors. Does this not sound familiar? A naval empire, once noble, now corrupted by its power and ambition, setting out to conquer others. Atlantis was not a memory of a real place. It was a mirror. It was Plato holding up a reflection to Athens itself, and asking, is this what we have become? The war between ancient Athens and Atlantis is the war for Greece's soul. And in the story, it is the virtuous, land-based power that wins. It is a profoundly conservative political statement. A warning against the dangers of imperialism, greed, and naval expansion. The absurdly ancient date, 9,000 years, was not a historical error. It was a philosophical device, placing the story in a mythical, ideal time, beyond the reach of conventional history, lending it the authority of a sacred fable. The city is destroyed by the gods not just for a dramatic ending, but as the ultimate punishment for hubris. It is the fate that awaits any civilization, even the most powerful, that loses its virtue. The search for Atlantis has never really been about geology or archaeology. It is a search for a part of ourselves. A desire for a lost golden age. A fascination with the idea that something so great could be so utterly erased. It speaks to our deepest fear, that our own civilization, for all its concrete and steel and digital memory, is just as ephemeral. Plato did not give us a treasure map. He gave us a warning. He created the most perfect, most powerful, most magnificent civilization imaginable, and then he destroyed it, to teach us a lesson about the corrupting nature of power and the hubris that can bring any great nation to its knees. The mystery is not where Atlantis is. The mystery is whether we will ever heed its lesson. The search for Atlantis ends exactly where it began. Not in the silent depths of the ocean, but in the restless depths of the human soul.